Hello everyone, my name is Julian. I am the pastor of Ulverston Christian Reformed Church, and you are watching another one of our videos as we take a chunk or book of the Bible and seek to give some background on it for perhaps an upcoming sermon series or simply to help you as you read through that part of the Bible. Now, last year we looked at, as a church, the first 8 chapters of Mark. In a couple of weeks, we're going to start up with the second half of Mark, chapters 9 through 16. Now, in that previous sermon series, I mentioned that Mark, as a gospel, has what we call a crown-shaped structure. I'm going to show you what that means in just a moment, but essentially it boils down to the fact that we tend to cut Mark in two, around 2 different questions that Mark is trying to answer. In chapters 1 through 8, the question driving all of the things that Mark talks about is the question, who is this man? Who is Jesus? What's he all about? Who is he really? And we explore that through the different stories and teachings and events that Mark records. Now, the second half of that of the book of Mark then asks the question, what does that mean? Halfway through Mark, right at the end of chapter 8, we get the confession of Peter, where he says, you are the Christ. Finally, the question's been answered. Finally, we know who Jesus is. But what does that mean? What does that actually mean for the disciples? What does that mean for the world? And that then is Mark's question that preoccupies the second half of the book. And it culminates then in the cross and the resurrection, and particularly in the confession of the centurion. Now, I mentioned before the cross-shaped structure of Mark. Let me now try and demonstrate it. Apologies for the drawing. This is what we mean by the cross-shaped structure of Mark. And we talk about it being structured around these 3 confessions of who Jesus is. Now, right at the start in Mark 1, verse 1 to 3, Mark himself tells us right off the bat who Jesus is. He uses the words of the prophet Isaiah to say, the one is coming, the Messiah is here. Then we travel through this period, this almost low point of people failing to recognize that. But finally, people get closer and closer, which brings us to the middle point of Mark, to that high point of Peter's own confession. You are the Christ. Finally, someone's got it. The question's been answered. But now we have to go through that process of trying to understand what that means. And it's only after at the cross, when Mark records the Roman centurion witnessing Jesus' death on the cross, saying, truly, this man was the Son of God. It is there that Mark finally answers his question. And this riddle of the book is revealed on the lips of this Roman centurion. There at the cross, we see who Jesus is. We understand him as the Son of God, the crucified Saviour. Now I want you to keep that in mind as we go through these chapters as a church, but also as you read through the book of Mark again. Particularly when you come to the second half of Mark from chapter 9 through 16, look for the great centrality of the cross. We see it in what Jesus says. Constantly now he is referring to his impending suffering and death. He keeps coming back to it. The disciples don't get it. The crowd doesn't get it. But he keeps bringing us back there. But secondly, look at the way Mark himself draws us to the cross. In fact, it's already at chapter 11 that Jesus arrives in Jerusalem. And that long, extended journey to the cross, through all that series of events in Jerusalem, takes place. Now, sometimes Mark is described as a passion narrative, that is a cross narrative with an extended introduction. And you kind of see that. 5 chapters from chapter 11 through 16 are focused on that path to the cross. As you read through those chapters, look for the signs of confrontation as Jesus, walking this harder path, walking this cross-shaped path, heads to the cross. There's confrontation building with the religious leaders, which is of course going to culminate in them leading him to his death. But he's also constantly coming into confrontation with the worldview of the people around him, with his own disciples, even as he reinterprets what it means to live a faithful life as a follower of Jesus and as a citizen of the kingdom he is bringing. What he's bringing is better, but it takes a while to see that and to see how that is possible through suffering and death, and ultimately through resurrection. It's a wonderfully crafted second half to this book, and constantly we're being challenged to think not only who is Jesus, but what does it mean to follow Jesus, especially since he goes to the cross. I encourage you to read it thoroughly, read it multiple times, and see who Jesus is as he reveals himself in these pages. I hope you enjoy it.